Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar on the future of work post-COVID-19. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and will be available on both the ICAEW's website and the MSCHRF's Facebook site. I'm Professor Eleni Stavrou-Costea, the Director of the MSc in Human Resource Management of the University of Cyprus, and I will be chairing tonight's event. We have 5 very insightful interventions from highly successful professionals in the fields with a diversity of backgrounds who will be approaching the subject from a variety of angles. So in the meantime, feel free to write your questions and comments in the Zoom's chat, and we will address them all at the end. The first intervention will be from Mr. Panayiotis Thrasyvoulou, touching upon the subject of the future of work and the future of skills from a macro perspective across industries and professions. Mr. Thrasyvoulou is the president of the Cyprus Human Resource Management Association, presently serving his 2nd term. After many years of working as a human resource manager in various organizations, as well as running his own consulting business, he joined EY Cyprus as an associate partner and the head of People Advisory Service. Panayiotis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eleni. Thank you, Christiana. Thank you to ICAEW for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you here today. I'm going to start and talk to you, get you briefly through some trends affecting the future of work. We're going to see some of the trends and the mega trends affecting the future, and these trends are mainly driven by 2 forces. The forces of globalization, of technology, and of demographics. We're going to attempt to answer how will the workforce and the workplace look like. So there have been some changes recently due to the COVID-19 crisis, but these forces and the mega trends preceded the COVID-19 crisis and will persist long after it. Some of the things we are currently experiencing have to do with technology, of course, which has invaded our personal lives. And we are talking now about work-life integration instead of work-life balance. We need to find creative ways of interacting with colleagues and our spouses and family. Also, there has been a recent change in our preferences, given the fact that as consumers, we have experienced various new innovations and things related to e-commerce. We are starting to demand those experiences at work as well. So we demand experiences which are of consumer grade, as we say. Another trend that has started to emerge has to do with the fact that real estate square footage per employee has shrunk significantly. We see companies making work from home a bit more permanent. We see office space being utilized differently. We have seen companies moving to the suburbs to accommodate their employees and their new needs. And this trend, we believe that it will continue. Something which we do not usually discuss, but it's really, really important, is that in the future of work, the purpose-driven workplace will become very, very important. New generation employees demand, and they are being inspired by purpose-driven organizations, which are also socially responsible and sensitive. So organizations in the traditional sectors, we need to attract talent from more sexy industries, let's call them. And to do that, they need to provide a strong purpose. We're going to see analysts, we're going to see data scientists, we're going to see engineers and software developers and being employed at retailers and banks which are operating in more traditional sectors. And these companies need to attract those people away from other sectors, and to do that they need to provide a strong purpose. And we've got research that shows that the majority of millennials is attracted by companies who have a social impact as well. So organizations are co-branding with NGOs and other social causes so as to be more attractive to the younger generations. We also see some other trends related to the aging population, and we see that aging population in Europe and the US is becoming the norm. So regardless of the fact that we're talking about Generation Z and the massive intrusion of Generation Z in the workplace, there is an aging generation of employees who cannot that easily exit employment nowadays, because the systems, the social security systems that support us will become more heavy, let's say, and the people of older generations need to find some alternative income generating activities, not necessarily as full-time employees, but maybe combine those activities with their vacation and their travel. And we also see the layout of the offices changing, because as work from home becomes the norm, whenever we go to the office, we should have a reason to do so. And most probably we're gonna be going to the office to meet with our teams, to brainstorm, to create, to solve problems. So to do that, we need to move away from cubicles and into more collaborative layouts, such as collaboration rooms, more conference rooms, etc. So these are some changes related to the immediate future. As we said, technology and demographics are the main drivers. We see that if I was to choose something within this brief period of time that I will be talking, that it's the most important trend, I will say that on the one hand, we've got the massive intrusion of the Generation Z, which is 1.8 billion people entering the workplace. The fact that Generation Z mostly resides in Africa and Asia, the fact that the African and Asian population, working population, is 4 times the size of the Western workforces, and also the fact that the majority of people nowadays work under alternative forms of employment. So for the first time in history, from this year onwards, we're going to see the majority of employees working under alternative forms of employment, contingent work, such as freelance, such as contractors, job sharing, part-time, and so on. And this mixture creates several challenges for management and leaders. And the majority of leaders of today are millennials. As millennials, we have now grown up and we are in the middle of the generational spectrum. And the majority of millennials took on manager roles during the last 5 years. And those managers are ill-equipped to manage and lead in the future workplace. And the future workplace is so challenging and so diverse that we need to train ourselves on several new emerging skills. The diversity is not only in terms of age and gender, but also comes from age. We have up to 5 generations coexisting together in the same workplace. And we have diversity in terms of types of employees. So we have at least 4 different types of employees nowadays. We have the full-time on-premise employees. We have those working under alternative forms of employment. We have the remote employees, either full-time or alternative forms. And we have employees who are not even human. We have the bots, we have the robotic process automations, intelligent automations, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So within this dynamic environment, we are called to manage and lead and collaborate most of the times remotely, and we see that every day. And we need to thrive without having the necessary skills. And beyond that, we have what we call automation anxiety. Automation anxiety refers to the fact that we think that technology will take over our jobs. The fact is that I'm not going to go through the details, but the fact is that this is not so scary as it used to be. The narrative is not so scary anymore. We see that technology will take over the mechanistic, repetitive, and standardized parts of our job, and our jobs will become more interesting. What will remain with our jobs will become more interesting. But to do our jobs, we need social interpersonal skills. And this is a big challenge for tomorrow. There's going to be a net surplus of jobs created. So most of the jobs will be, some of the jobs will be eliminated by automation. Many jobs will be created, but most jobs will be transformed by automation. You can see here non-traditional professions having been transformed by automation up until recently. And I was reading today that there is going to be up to 87 million vacancies which will be unfilled by the end of the decade. So there's going to be a huge skills disequilibrium, and the reason is that we are not well prepared for what's coming. And what's coming actually has to do with new innovations, and the reality is that we don't know what's coming entirely. There is research that shows that the majority of our children will end up in jobs that do not even exist. They will have some sort of a portfolio career, so desperate projects. And those jobs certainly will require soft skills, and more than a third of the skills required in the jobs will change. Soft skills relate to creative problem solving, managing people and diverse teams, as we already discussed, social and emotional intelligence, and creativity the ability to create new products and services. And this creates the need to upgrade our skills, to cross-train and upskill, so as to prepare ourselves for what's coming in the future. Skills become obsolete very quickly, knowledge doubles every 2 years, and this is an indication, a sign that we need to invest on ourselves to prepare for the future of work. The future of work makes the rise of soft skills, and soft skills become much more important. Even developers, front-end, back-end developers, even analysts, even accountants who are engaged in analytics will need some sort of soft skills to collaborate remotely, to collaborate effectively, to analyze data through deductive thinking, to simplify them, to present them in the most effective form. So we're going to need those skills even more in the future, because automation will take over a big chunk of our jobs, the boring part of our jobs, and what will remain with us will require those soft skills. So the future is interesting, to say the least, and I'm available for discussion later. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Panayiotis, for your insight on the future of work. Especially interesting are the two macro drivers that you described, namely the demographics and the technology, and how those will affect our future at work. But I also love the term you work-life integration as different from work-life balance. So very, very insightful. Thank you. Our next presenter is Mr. Savvas Pashias, who will share with us his insight on COVID-19 the day after from a banking sector perspective. So we're honing into the banking sector right now. Mr. Pashias, with over 10 years of proven track record in executive positions in the banking industry in Cyprus and abroad, is the CFO and member of the Executive Committee of Ancoria Bank. Savvas, you have the floor.
Thank you for the intro, Eleni. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. My contribution to this discussion will be on the impact COVID-19 had on our daily work and planned activities, as well as on our interaction with customers, sharing with you the changes we have seen taking place already in the banking sector and those we expect seeing going forward. So let's go to the first slide. That will be the next one, I suppose. Okay, so I should first state the obvious. COVID-19 has changed business forever. And the way we bank, the way we are performing our banking transactions is certainly no exception. Interaction between banking institutions and customers has changed, but this is not the only alteration we have observed. The pandemic has forced us to reckon in a holistic way, if I may say, how we view work, engagement with others, and the technologies that make this possible. So working from home has already become the norm, and it is highly unlikely that the corporate office will be the only place to get things done in the future. At the same time, banks have placed far greater focus and investment on their operational capabilities and ensuring that these are providing secure and uninterrupted service. And of course, health and safety protocols, both for staff and customers alike. Before the pandemic took hold, digital transformation was probably optional for many banks. Ever since, it seems that this approach has become a necessity, with most, if not all, banks moving towards digital or automated one way or another, also urging their customers to become digitally engaged and avoid visiting branches. And that is exactly where we see a significant shift in customer behavior and expectations. It is customers themselves that no longer wish to be visiting the branch. And not only that, but customers now expect banks to offer online whatever can be offered online. So COVID-19, in a sense, has propelled the faster adoption of automation and digital transformation. At the same time, it has pushed senior management of banking institutions to reconsider the type and intensity of work that truly needs to be performed in-house, reassessing options such as outsourcing and third-party partnerships. Moving on to the next slide, we have an overview of the changes we expect to see going forward. First and foremost, working models will be changed permanently. We do not anticipate that post-COVID-19 there will be any rush to return to office. A more hybrid model of work with a significantly higher degree of remote working compared to pre-crisis is expected. Also with staff working more digitally and customers embracing more digital interactions with banks, we also expect that office requirements will be reassessed and probably re-engineered. And along the same lines, the branch network will further reduce, an action that was already in progress after the 2013 crisis. On the side, these actions are expected to provide some material cost savings to banking institutions, something that will certainly be welcomed. Having said that, planning for business continuity is certain to change. We all know by now that the pandemic took everyone by surprise. If I recall correctly, in a US survey performed by Gartner, if I'm not mistaken, last year, out of 1,500 respondents, only 12% considered that the organizations were prepared for COVID-19. So banks will need to reassess their business continuity and disaster recovery strategy and plans, focusing on creating a more agile and flexible operating model, probably accommodating a more remote workforce. We also anticipate more focus to be placed on the automation of a wider range of daily tasks, thus allowing personnel to focus more on actions adding real value to customer experience and the organization in general. This is an opportunity not to be missed for the banks, as I believe there has never been a better time to have such a strong business case for massive automation of tasks. On the human resource side, I will touch on a couple of things that I was glad to hear Panayiotis mentioning earlier. Banks, and obviously referring to local ones, have traditionally been in a culture of their own, if I might say. Despite some not so obvious deviations between them in terms of approach of work, principles, and procedures, there are some very obvious similarities. Let us not forget that local banks have been working for many, many years within predefined working environments and time schedules. This is all due to change. The working landscape is now broader, with less frequent physical proximity between teams. And as a result, managers and leaders will need new kinds of skills in order to motivate team members working remotely and be able to understand how team members are responding to their objectives, targets, and feedback on their performance. And this should be seen as an opportunity for banks to consider changes in workforce composition, attraction and retention of personnel, as well as their development policies. On this matter, we anticipate that banks would likely need to invest far more in supporting their people. Upskilling, reskilling may be required, as will investment in mental health and well-being support, which will be crucial to cope within the transition to this new environment. And this is all from me. Thank you for your time.
Eleni, I think you're on mute. No.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Savvas. I really like how you outlined the changes in the banking sector, as well as your pointers on what to expect going forward. Now, after looking at the banking sector perspective, we will turn to the accounting profession in Cyprus, where Mr. Kyriakos Iordanou will talk to us about adapting to the new working norms. Mr. Iordanou is the General Manager of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Cyprus and has a long and successful career in the profession. Kyriakos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eleni. Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome you to this event, and I think I'm continuing from where the previous two speakers have left during their speeches. Yeah, I think that's yeah, sorry, just a second with the presentation. Can you see my presentation if I can ask you?
Hi, Kyriakos. Yeah, I'm sharing it for you. So.
Yeah, the slides are not changing, so I'm.
If you just say next slide, I can do it for you.
Sorry.
If you just ask me when to change, I'll change them for you.
Good. Change it, please.
Great. Okay. There we go. Thanks.
So after the events we had last year with the COVID blast, where it was indeed a game, business, social, cultural, and anything else you can call it as a changer, a lot of things came to surface. And both socially and business-wise, we have to work with them, live with them, manage them. Can we change that, please? So let's look at the effects of the pandemic in briefly. There has been uncertainty around. If you recall, last March, everybody was, it was a big unknown what would happen next day. There was disruption in everything we did. There was fear, panic out there. It caused immediate distancing between ourselves, conservatism, between us, individualism. Firstly, we thought about ourselves and then everything else. Conservation, that is to remain in a healthy state, us and our loved ones, our families. And also it created a lot of psychological other factors of concern. In the next slides, there's going to be some listing of some major social and business consequences which we all experienced. We had the lockdowns in every sort. We had the imposed social distancing and isolation. Plus, we became a bit more introvert. We have the closure of businesses. Some are still closed since then. Contraction of the economic activity. A lot of other factors being created, emerging out of these predicaments. We had redundancies in jobs. We had the imposition of the remote working, a lot of hygiene measures, a lot of medical and health issues. We had the closure of schools, a lot of social issues there as well. So what I think we did quite well, it was our reactions, as we can see on the next slide. I think that, and I'm talking now about more or less the country, but the institute as well, what we did. We reacted fast to this change. As an institute, we did adapt very, very quickly to the new situation. We got a bit prepared one way or the other. It helped us to accelerate our technological advancement. It helped us to reach the digital transformation a bit easier and much quicker, of course, and be accepted by everybody. So we expedited digitalization. The rebound was quite successful because it gave us the opportunity to do a couple of other things as well, which most probably would park it for a bit later, like rethinking and reforming the current practices we have at our jobs. We increased the dissemination of information to members about the measures, legislation being passed, anything that affected them. So we became like a guardian for our members, I would say. We made a lot of adjustments in our, let's put it like that, regulations. And we offered some relaxations for various deadlines. So we had a social aspect there as well, which also came in parallel with other social and community concerns for our members, that is, provide them with any assistance possible for either professional or personal matters through the benevolent fund and any other means that the institute has. So what we did, we were quite well prepared to take on the challenge, and we worked as close as possible to the membership and the firms in order to be able to continue operating. Obviously, it was a bit chaotic, the initial situation, but gradually it starts to smooth out. So there are a number of considerations that we need to have in mind, as seen on the following slide, which are, well, definitely mental health. So there's people that may need assistance there, this changeover. We are concerned about the well-being of our staff and members. Digitalization is top priority. Panayiotis expressed it, I think, in the best way earlier on. Definitely, we need a new set of skills, both for us, for our staff, our colleagues, and our members. So we need to work both in soft skills, but in practical skills as well. We're coming to a new culture around this new situation that we are living in, which calls for an amended lifestyle, what was being described before as integration rather than balance, work-life balance. Human interaction is fundamental. It will remain fundamental. It's part of our business. As accountants, we cannot work in isolation. The isolation cost and the fact that there is a lot of working from home activity may impair the feeling of belonging somewhere. So we need to find ways to keep our people around us and satisfy their social needs. Other factors of consideration is, of course, technology in all aspects. We need to find ways to maintain the team building activities. Otherwise, everybody will be working on its own. Factors that we also need to consider, and we have seen in a number of firms where they have trainees on the job training, which is something which is fundamental in our business, in our sector, isn't so easy. nowadays. And of course, there are factors that need to be considered, like productivity, and of course, how we motivate and we manage our people and our and of course work with our clients. In addition, I agree with what has been mentioned before. Personal development is in hand with training, as well as business development. It's especially if you are dealing with international clients or penetrating into other markets, doing international business from social media or a phone or an email it is not so effective at the end of the day. So business development, new businesses take on are fundamental, and because there is this lack of social interaction, maybe there will be also a factor to consider regarding the trust and confidence that we transfer and instill to the other counterparts, which are again very critical to our profession. So in my last slide, I'd like to finish with some things that are here to stay. In general, we have all become more careful socially. So we are being a bit more cautious when we interact with people. Obviously, we need to do that due to hygiene reasons. There's been working from home, it's here to stay. I think it's about time that we had it. Remote interaction, work, doing meetings, doing other activities like this one remotely, each one from the safety of their own office, home. Technology is sine qua non, it's here, it's fundamental, everything is built around it. Reevaluation on all our priorities and values. We need to reconsider where we stand. And as I said before, we are entering into a new cultural mode with new attitudes. That's going to be, as rightly mentioned before, transformation of jobs. Some will disappear, a lot more will appear. The types of employment also change. Alternative, full-time might be a bit might not be so commonly used going forward. Artificial intelligence is something that we must account for. It's here. And machine learning, automation, I think that there's nothing additional to add there. In our work as accountants, as auditors, all of this can work. We do work from distance. We do process our clients' affairs remotely through accounting and other software. And we as regulators as well monitor our members again. We have the capacity to do it remotely, and we did it from last year. So it's here to stay for people, more or less what I have just mentioned. Companies, again, we will learn to work with different working modes. For regulators and professional bodies like us, again, we will adapt to the new norms and work a bit from distance. We'll innovate other types of correspondence and approach to our members. Training, of course, which is one of the basics of this profession, will be adjusted accordingly. So far, we have been working for the last 15 years remotely and with online courses. I agree with what was mentioned before about business continuity. Yeah, we need to rethink it, and also we need to rethink about our risk assessment in all aspects. The same goes for governments from their side of activity, and I think that the COVID predicament and the changes that we are forced to live with, okay, they do pose us threats, But I think that we can identify the positive challenges in this new set of realities that we've got around us. And I think that it is a catalyst for change, a catalyst for technological advancement, and a catalyst to enter a bit faster in the new generations. I think that's all from me, and I am available for any question later on.
Of the accounting profession. I particularly appreciated your reference to the rebound process and the need to reevaluate a number of actions, especially taking care of the social and other needs of the accounting community. Okay, now we move on to the next two interventions, which will be reports of studies conducted in relation to work on COVID-19. The first one was among Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales members from over 50 countries inquiring if COVID-19 changed work forever. This presentation will be given by Mrs. Christiana Diola. Mrs. Diola is the ICAEW's head of Cyprus and Greece and a senior member of the Institute's Europe region team. While being a successful professional, she also taught various courses at the University of Cyprus and is a dear colleague. Christiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eleni. It's good to be working with you again, and fantastic to be joining you and esteemed colleagues this evening. And the insights so far have been really very interesting, and so thank you for bringing us all together to hear the aspects from various industries, and also looking forward to hear from Maria's research later on too. So we were very interested to hear whether the perspectives from our membership, which is diverse across practice, professional services, but also in business. The majority of our members work in business in senior leadership roles, managing people, managing processes, working usually with teams. And so it was really very important for us to understand their insights in order to service them better. But I think I want to echo also my colleague Kyriakos from the Cypriot Institute's insights too, that this has had a radical impact on the way that we service our members all over the world, bearing in mind the technological transformation that we ourselves have undergone. So it has been an exciting time for all organizations. So moving on to the next slide, as you mentioned already, Eleni, we were very keen to gain the insights from our members who are leading businesses and managing people. Importantly, so that we can support them better, but also to understand what the impact on innovation is, the impact on decision making, the impact on strategy, as well as the impact on managing people, whether that's onboarding or continuous training, and how we can best support the organizations that we work with and our members who work at different life career stages to manage these challenges as best they can. So, as you mentioned, our members came from over 50 countries. We had a good population from Cyprus too, where we have a strong membership, and those insights came probably at a very difficult time in November across the countries that we surveyed. So moving on to the next slide. Probably stating the obvious after the insights that we'd heard, but as you see here, vast majority of our members working across business and practice clearly set out that they believe things will look very different going forward. So how they will look forward, of course, time will tell, because we're very interested in order to see and evaluate those permanent and semi-permanent or even temporary impacts and how it impacts business models, decision making, and of course the skills requirement in the workplace. So moving on to the next slide, looking at some of the positive aspects on working life and what our members are reporting. And we can see here, reflecting and echoing some of the frontline aspects that have been mentioned by Panayiotis and Savvas and Kyriakos, that we see that our members have embraced the increase in remote working. They see that it works. They see that it hasn't impacted productivity. and that the acceleration of digital transformation is also a positive impact on their workplace. Flexible and part-time working has already been mentioned too, something that gives people that additional work-life balance or integration, which is a nice new phrase that we've coined today. But we also see a substantial percentage of the membership that comes back to us and says, actually, access to the office and other workspaces, or our, if you like, our work lifestyle that we had before, whether that's traveling or meeting people in external places, has been missed, as well as the impact on well-being and mental health. So that says to us that face-to-face gives something which perhaps we'd underestimated before, and we need to measure the impact of that. And there was a very interesting comment in the Financial Times today from a senior leader from the Boston Consultant Group that says, because we work together effectively doesn't necessarily mean that we can work apart effectively too. So the impact on culture, morale, and decision-making and innovation. Moving on to the next slide, and building on that face-to-face, the importance of face-to-face interactions, and we can see the impact radically there before of how our members are reacting to this. And I think it's quite clear that business development, building new relationships, especially when it comes to client development and growth of business, but also with onboarding new staff and integrating them into the cultural system and the trainings and methodologies of organizations has been a challenge. Morale and culture are impacted too. But on the other side, we see big positivity and productivity gains with respect to existing relationships. So where we already have some social capital, we're able to maintain that and even grow those relationships. So the challenge with face-to-face, we can see impacts the innovative side and the training and development and growth aspect of our businesses. Moving forward. Just a final slide here, really, where we see where we need to focus to support our members, and also where organizations are clearly looking at going forward. It's already been mentioned today, a hybrid workplace is anticipated in order to have a balance between those productivity gains and lifestyle gains from remote working, but also to get people together in an alternative space in order to strategize and be innovative and build the business, which is important. And all of this, of course, relies on strong technological infrastructure. So that impacts the way the skills that are acquired by new staff members and the professionals of tomorrow. And we've taken that, of course, on board as a professional body to support our members through this digital transformative age. The necessity of human interaction, it's been underlined, the human factor, through all the interventions this evening. We can't get away from it. It's absolutely crucial that people have the opportunity to get together, especially if they're new to an organization. And where we've also seen gaps that have come through, that the importance of ensuring that the remote working doesn't mean a remote understanding of what is happening inside the business. So ensuring that everybody in the business is on the same page, whether they're remotely working or working in the physical space. So tackling these areas we see as challenges and opportunities for tomorrow. So I hope that's been helpful, and looking forward to hear the other insights and the research that Maria also prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiana. Indeed, very interesting perceptions and opinions on the subject by your institute's members. For me, the most important takeaway is the value attributed to the human factor after the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic, how the human factor has been raised in importance. Okay, last but not least, Mrs. Maria Phasoulidou will present her own studies results conducted on a more general population of employees, not in specific sectors as before. Therefore, we're honing out again to analyzing employee perceptions in various industries and professions. Her title, the #1 practice to promote employee well-being during the working from home era. Mrs. Phasoulidou has recently graduated from the MSc in Human Resource Management from the University of Cyprus, and the study that she will be presenting was part of her master's thesis. So she did a superb job. Very proud as an ex-professor. And currently, She works as a management consultant at the KPMG offices of Cyprus. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Costea. So this has been a really big project, and it has been a challenge for me to just briefly talk about the most important results of my study. But I'm really excited to build upon previous interventions and dive deeper on the human factor and how it relates with working from home. So moving on to the next slide, I wanted to briefly capture how the COVID-19 situation is shaping the future of work now, and how this is different from remote work of the past, because remote work is not something that has been established now, but we can definitely say that working from home is vastly different than remote work of the past. So how is this different? I want to briefly state 3 reasons. The first one is that a big portion of employees now work from home, as opposed to in the past, which was a very, very, very small part of a company. Second, employees are very concerned about their own, their families, their colleagues, and their friends' health. And finally, there is a lack of physical activity due to lockdown measures. So all of these affect negatively and have actually a really big impact on employees' mental health. And organizations are faced with a challenge now. So how do we ensure that employees are mentally happy, mentally stable, and we can engage them to be as productive as they are now when all of this is happening? And what I studied in my thesis here is various working from home practices and how they can help ensure high employee well-being. As we move on to the next slide, I want to briefly state what is employee well-being before discussing the results of the research. So while there are a lot of different conceptualizations of employee well-being, today and in my research, I used psychological well-being and psychological ill-being to describe this construct. Psychological well-being is a multidimensional construct that describes describes the state of being someone managing well their environment, having a positive outlook about life, and having a purpose in life. While psychological ill-being also refers to a multi-dimensional construct, but on the other hand, it describes a negative state of mind, depressive symptoms, and stress. So what I want to highlight is that an individual's healthy state of mind is predicted by having both high psychological well-being and low psychological ill-being at the same time. And as we move on to the next slide, we can see briefly here the methodology and the design of the questionnaire I used to study this. And what I did is that I studied the literature, and I found different working from home practices that literature suggests is good for having employee well-being. And I created a questionnaire, and as you can see here, I grouped these in dimensions. We can see engagement, communication, relationship with supervisors, support for mental health, work trips, and employee monitoring. Work trips and employee monitoring are actually some bad examples of working from home practices that literature suggested that this actually affect negatively the employee's mental health. So I included them to examine this. And I'm sure all of us are familiar with different working from home practices. So I won't go in detail about each one of them. But just to give you an overview about the kind of items I used to measure these dimensions, there were practices about an organization providing stress webinars, conducting virtual happy hours, providing emotional professional support, providing transparent communication, and all of that stuff. And on the other side, I used the instruments presented on screen to measure psychological well-being and psychological ill-being. And I used factorial analysis and correlation analysis and regression analysis to identify which one of all of these dimensions has the biggest correlation with psychological well-being and psychological ill-being. And as we see in the next slide, a very interesting result emerged. Out of all of the different working from home practices, the one that has a positive relationship with psychological well-being and a negative relationship with psychological ill-being is the relationship with supervisor. And you're seeing now in the screen some items used in the questionnaire and in the study to describe this practice. So as we see, practices that promote a supervisor's relationship with their employee by the supervisor providing both emotional and professional support and being trustful of the employee and allowing them to share their voice. This, in fact, can have a big impact on employees' mental health. And as we also see in the next slide, you can see here the exact numbers about the effect relationship with supervisor has to employees' psychological well-being and psychological ill-being. And together, these results indicate that employees feel appreciated by their supervisor or their manager, and they have a good relationship with them that enables them to share their voice, gain emotional and professional support, experience both an increased psychological well-being and a decreased psychological ill-being, and to be more precise, decreased stress. So this is very insightful because out of all of the working from home practices that were examined, only this factor has had a relationship with both psychological well-being and psychological ill-being. And as briefly explained before, for an employee to be considered happy, to be considered to have a healthy state of mind, both of these conditions have to be present. Next slide, please. But so what? What are the implications for organizations as we're examining the future of work post-COVID-19? So the results of this study illustrate that the best solution for ensuring a high psychological state, healthy psychological state of the workforce is in fact the simplest, and it lies to the manager's everyday behavior with their employees. And I want to highlight 2 points here. And what I want you to remember is the first, that organizations can focus first on improving their manager's relationship with their employees before engaging on different working from home practices. We saw before many different practices that will emerge as part of the future of work post-COVID-19. And we can see here that maybe the first step in actually preparing the workforce for the future in that hybrid state of working, which will also include working from home, is to develop supervisors and managers' relationship with their employees. And this is not to say that other work from home practices are not as equally important, but I'm just stating the results of this study, which really illustrate the essence of a manager's job in building trust and in engaging their employees in these difficult times. And the second thing I wanted to manage is that, of course, organizations will develop different practices to support the relationship of employees with their supervisor, like, for example, training on soft skills, which has also been mentioned before by previous interventions. But what I want to highlight today is the fact that managers can start from now, from tomorrow, performing these behaviors, even without the direct support of their organization. And what I mean by this is that even without having these specific practices by the organization, they can just start providing this extra support to their employees by, for example, conducting weekly or monthly one-to-one calls with their employees to provide them both emotional and professional support, which I believe we all know is really important today. So I will leave you with this note today that these practices, and by focusing on the relationship of a supervisor with their employees, we can have quick wins and ensure a healthy state of mind of the employees. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maria. A very interesting insight on both increasing well-being and decreasing ill-being. Most fascinating is that at the end of the day, it is not the practices per se, but one's relationship with their supervisor that will make the difference. Okay, and here we came to an end of the interventions, and would very much like to open the session up for discussion. We don't have, we only have one question in the chat, but I'm not sure if other people would like to maybe raise, is there a hand raised that we can, yeah, if people would like to raise their hand and we'll give them the floor to ask their question or make a comment. Until people decide if they want to make a comment or ask a question, let me address, I think this question was towards the first presenter, Panayiotis. And the question is, believe the most important skill that needs to be developed is a continuous growth and learning mindset. Do you agree with this? Maybe Panayiotis can start with the answer first, and maybe anybody else who wants to also give their insight could also do that. Panayiotis?
Yeah, Eleni, thank you. Yeah, definitely continuous growth and learning mindset are very important. I would say that these are some dispositions that people have for remaining relevant. So having this continuous curiosity and the proper learning approach, as well as believing that they can always improve and we are work in progress and not just something which is a finished product. It's really important for the future because things will be changing very fast and we need to be able to adapt in an agile manner. And that's one of the most critical capabilities to have in the future. Of course, there are more things that are important, such as our ability to collaborate virtually, leadership, emotional and social intelligence, as we said, critical thinking, complex problem solving, and all those things that we discussed. And these will become, as we said, much more relevant in the future. There will be a necessity. We see it in many industries. We see it in banking, for example, as back-end automations and front-end shifts to digital channels dictate that the remaining work will be organized around teams, and there are going to be many teams working around creating new products, finding new solutions to services, serving clients, managing all these relationships, developing the business in new ways. So all these will require those kinds of skills that we discussed. And certainly, yeah, our ability to constantly remain relevant by having this growth learning mindset and the continuous growth mindset are going to be really important for the future. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Panayiotis. Anybody else from the panel would like to comment on that? No? Okay. In fact, I wanted to ask Christiana a question, maybe 2 or 3 questions, but I'll start with 1 or 2. Christiana, could you share with us the sample size and maybe some of the demographics of the people that replied to your questionnaire so that our audience can get a feel about the diversity of your members?
Yes, certainly. So we have an a membership, a global membership of coming up to 160,000. The majority is based in the UK, but of our 30,000 or so members outside the UK, we'd polled a number close to 400 across 50 different countries. But the number to us is really significant because of the organizations that our members are involved in and the people that they manage. So their insights are really very, very important to us in shaping the way that we look at business and how we can best support our members in the future professionals.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, I wanted to also ask Kyriakos on what caught my attention when you said that you had to reevaluate how to take care of your community's needs, social and other. Can you elaborate a bit on that? What are the different, let's say, needs that you had to attend to, and how were you able to help them with?
Well, one of the first things we did was to try to be as responsive to the members as possible regarding their inquiries around COVID and how they were allowed to work under the various conditions in the decrees issued by the government. There was also a change. There were also a lot of changes in the legal environment. So we had to provide them with all the information. So what we did, we started, let's call it a bit spoon feeding, with all the information that was relevant to them, both on our websites and also with direct emailing. The other thing that we also did was to be very as flexible as possible, let's put it like that, to colleagues that were victims of the situation, that is, were made redundant or had, anyways, difficulties in meeting their obligations towards ICPAC. So we tried to be as closer to them as possible, as well as with the members that practice in the profession, with their let's say obligations towards the institute. The other thing that we did very soon after the outburst of the pandemic was to have a lot of online working sessions with various clusters of our membership, either from bigger firms, smaller firms, public sector, private sector, shipping industries, the CFOs. So we tried to evaluate the needs and the challenges that each cluster, each type, let's say, professional type of our members had. So that was a very, very interesting experience at the time. So we've learned a lot how things were done, and also we've learned a lot of the affairs of the economy overall. The next thing that we started doing was to transform the way we operated to a more digital manner. It expedited the process. And we're hoping that soon we will be able to release these new pieces of technology that we've added to our existing systems either through new workflows and make it easier for members to do to handle their affairs electronically with us. So we, as I said, we tried to see to write down the major challenges they had in their professional, mainly professional interactions, and liaise with the government and other stakeholders as to how we can offer them solutions to a lot of problems that were caused during those times, as well as adjust all the training that was delivered by ICPAC through online, through collaboration with other associations, with other training providers, other organizations, in order to maintain a smooth flow of training activity. And I would just end by saying that it was not just to maintain their CPDs there. It was also a way, because lots of, especially in the early stages, were at home. So we wanted to provide them with something useful and viable to do as well.
I think that training is key in all of these. I wanted to ask Savvas a question on that. In your presentation, Savvas, you said that the leadership and management skills will need to change. You need to have a shift in leadership and management skills. What kind of training or what kind of new skills will be necessary in this new, let's say, era, post-COVID era?
Thank you, Eleni, for the question. It's a good question, actually. On one hand, we're definitely in a learning process. We're all learning out of this. There is no book that was available when all this started that we could just run to it and go through and get the answers we needed as managers. Most probably we wished there was one. There wasn't any. So on one hand, we're learning through experience. But I think that since COVID first started, I think we've covered a long way. And we've had the opportunities to figure out a few of those skills that will be needed going forward. Maria touched a few very, very interesting things on this matter through her work. Well, also Panayiotis, we expect to be, as managers and as leaders, close. We have to give closure to our people. We have to be able to read them through the screen. Let's not forget, it's not the same having people here on premises, on site, have this, what we call the corridor chat. There's no such thing. And let's not forget also that it's not the same having people here, getting to know how to work with them, and then these people just one day they just switch to remote working. The difficult part is going to be when new employees start coming in. How are you going to be able to have an impact on them as their manager, as their leader, when they didn't even have the chance to work with you just for a full day? You know, have the opportunity to discuss maybe some things off work. So you need to give them closure. You need to have the skill to read their emotions through the screen, through the telephone conversation. You need, and I think Panayiotis mentioned that, you need to be agile in sense of being able to implement changes before they need to be implemented. So you need to switch the composition of your workforce in order to complete tasks, to deliver, to have deliverables. So in a sense, I would say that the primary skill I would consider is become more emotional. As managers, we have to be able to understand our people better. And from there on, being able to listen to them, show more empathy, if I may say. I think that those would be the priorities in terms of skills. And from there on, of course, training, re-engineering people, this very nice word, reskilling people, you know, changing skills. We know this, tomorrow we need to learn something different. Doesn't matter that we have experience on a niche environment. We need to be able to change our skills. It's the new era.
Thank you. Thank you, Savvas. I want to continue that thread on training before we go to one of the questions in the audience. And I want to ask Maria, because Maria gave a very insightful presentation and some very insightful recommendations that managers could tomorrow start communicating and giving feedback and supporting their employees. And I agree with you, Maria. How would you recommend they do that? I mean, what would they need? What support or tools or skills will they need to do that? Because not everybody is natural, you know, in this kind of communication process.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, it's not, as said, you can start doing it tomorrow, but it's of course easier said than done, because for managers to actually go in that place and be able to support both professionally and emotionally their employees, they have to have the skills, they have to have empathy, emotional intelligence, they have to know how to communicate their concerns. For example, not everything is going well while working from home, even more so now that 1 year has already passed. It's not like in the beginning where we were more okay, it's a mistake, I'll let it pass. But if if now that 1 year has passed, maybe people are becoming more impatient. So what I'd suggest as a way to reskill managers and areas to focus is definitely emotional intelligence and empathy. And the other thing I'd like to highlight is trust. I didn't really touch upon this on my presentation, but trust is very, very, very important. And we have to remember that employees, they're not going to behave differently now that they're working from home and we can't see them than before when they were in the office. Their behavior is going to change the same. And there's actually research that touched upon that, and they agree. So as the first step so people can start doing what I said in my presentation tomorrow is to keep in mind to trust the other employees, the other people, your team, and trust them to act like you do, like you keep doing your job, you're engaged, empowered. And at the same time, a final thing is to communicate with employees. So if we see that an employee is not behaving or performing as expected, there are ways of employee monitoring, for example, productivity data, and that could actually harm employees' trust to the organization and to the management. So this is why it all ties together. So it's first trust, being able to trust employees, and then invest in training in emotional intelligence, empathy, so you can understand how to support best employees. But of course, this is a learning curve. It might not be easy to have empathy. We say empathy, but if we are conditioned to think the worst out of people, it's hard to change. So yes, first thing, read about the dimensions of empathy and emotional intelligence and how we can become better versions of ourselves. And then, of course, organizations have to invest in training managers and employees in all of their aforementioned skills.
Great, thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. Now there was a question from the audience. How do you see the future of the traditional accounting profession? And I wonder, Christiana, if you can first try to address this question for us.
Thank you. The future of the accountancy profession is exciting. That's certainly how we see it at the ICAEW. The accountancy profession is a force for positive change in the world, but as we recognize, and everyone has said it here, that we need to constantly accept the dynamic environment that we're operating in and reskill and refocus in order to adapt to this change. And that means that chartered accountants, the accountancy profession, must master technology. So we can't shy away from that, and we're all making steps forward in that direction, and Kyriakos from Selk has mentioned that too. We also need to position ourselves, and we are fast positioning ourselves as champions for a world of sustainable economies. And that's really the centerpiece of our public interest mandate at the ICAEW. We mean that from a business perspective. We see the need for the accountancy profession to support the transformation of business models to meet that goal. We see that from a tax perspective. So for those tax experts, that we need to create the incentive system within countries in order to make this happen. And we see it also from a regulatory perspective, and we anticipate radical change in the role of the statutory auditor, for example, in the years ahead, coming from the EU, but also from global pressures too. And thirdly, we see the accountancy profession taking on some of the empathy, I think, that Maria has mentioned and Savvas has mentioned too, the need for belonging and supporting, the need for communities and supporting each other and those networks. So the accountancy profession, we're really gung-ho, it's going to be here.
Great, thank you, Christiana. You're very enthusiastic about the accountancy profession. I can see that, very passionate. It's good that you're in that profession, so you're supporting it. Did Kyriakos want to add anything to that as Cyprus account?
Yes, firstly, I agree fully with Christiana. The question was, I think, mentioning traditional accountants. Well, there is no traditional accountant. We are an evolving species. As Christiana said before, it's an ongoing process of learning. It's an ongoing process of adjusting. It's an ongoing process of adapting. What I can say to my friend that asked the question is that, well, if what we've got in mind is someone that is recording expenses and issues invoices and does a manual audit, well, that's not traditional accounting. This is long history. So what the roles that we've got, I just gonna summarize in 3 or 4 bullet points, is firstly that we are a business facilitator. We assist our clients in their business activities to grow them, to keep them sustainable. We are part of the economic ecosystem, so we contribute to the overall economy. We want ourselves to be, and our members to be, thought leaders in the way we operate and in the way that the clients could work going forward. And of course, we are there to provide assurance and credibility based on an ethical foundation. So the role of the accountant is constantly evolving. It's part of the business, part of the industry, part of the society, I would say, overall. And it's going hand in hand with technology. As a matter if it is a small or big client, the propagation is there, and there is a lot of we've got a lot of interesting times ahead.
If I were to take out the word accountancy profession and I were to put there a banking profession, what would be the future of the traditional banking profession, Savvas?
Well, firstly, let me say I started off as an accountant, so Kyriakos is absolutely right. We're an evolving species. I'm not an accountant anymore. But having said that, I think we should simply forget about what banking was over the last, I don't know, 50, even 20 years. It's already something completely different, and it's going to be something completely different as we move forward. This digitization is only a small portion of that. It's a completely different ecosystem. The interaction with customers, the geographical position of branches, the products being offered, it's all changing so fast that we really cannot make strategic plans longer than 2-3 years. It's such a fast changing environment, so dynamic, that we just look ahead in the short to minimum medium term, and the plans are always with a grain of salt. We are basically expecting that the way we will bank is going to be completely different than what we do today. And it seems that it's not the banks that are changing this, it's the customers. I think I mentioned that during my presentation. It gets, we see this every day. The way customers are now perform their transactions, interact with us, it's completely transformed compared to even 2 or 3 years ago. They want everything online. They want to be able to have options. They want to personalize. They don't want anymore the general public products. They want personalized service, personalized products, even if I can say personalized relationship officer. The relationship officer, the person at the bank that they feel comfortable with. So without being able to tell you exactly how it's going to look like in the next 24 or 36 months, certainly it's exciting, exhausting, but exciting future, and we can't wait for it.
Did COVID play a part in these changes that you mentioned, these fast changes? Was COVID a part of it?
I think COVID propelled things to move forward much faster. If I have to, even though I was not planning to, but if I have to take Ancoria, it's a brand new bank. It's barely 5 years old. It was always in the strategy of Ancoria to be, let's say, a traditional bank in a more digital way. So it was always there. It was always in the plan. But obviously, and I mean, this is not wrong in any way, banks who have been older in this market, they may not have a digitization high on the agenda, or maybe they do have it high on the agenda, but there is always a reason not to move fast towards it. So I mentioned, I think, during the presentation, this digitally engaged. So this is a very nice, very interesting ratio. So you basically take all your customers' transactions and you divide them between which of those are being performed in a digital way versus those that are not, and they have to come into the branch. So when we look at this digitally engaged ratio, for Ancoria Bank, it has consistently been since day one over 80%. And what COVID didn't do anything really. I mean, it was always there, but at the same time, this is not the case with other banks, obviously. I mean, I think other banks that I participated in some of the presentations or had the chance to look at, this digitally engaged ratio has been rising since the breakout of the pandemic, and it continues to rise, and it may have exceeded our 80%. So definitely COVID has propelled things.
And I wonder about the demographics of the customers of the banks. I mean, maybe you have younger or more global customers versus more traditional older customers in some of the older banks of Cyprus. But this is food for thought and would definitely be a good case study. Now, I want to also ask the HR professionals in the room, in the panel, if I were to change the accountancy and the banking sector or the banking profession, and I would say, how do you see the future of the traditional HR profession? And that has COVID also put its little finger on any changes that you may tell us. Panayiotis and then Maria.
Yes, of course, Eleni. The future of HR is equally exciting as the future of the accountancy profession. We are seeing quite a few innovations taking place. We should mention, however, that technology and digital transformation is an enabler. It's just a tool for business transformation and to do our jobs more faster, more efficiently, and more effectively, and provide better experiences to customers and clients, including internal clients, by the way. So we have seen the advent of automation. We are seeing it today in Cyprus, and we are experiencing it. We are seeing a lot of RPAs being implemented, robotic process automations, not just with regards to invoice processing, but also in HR with regards to automating parts of the induction process, for example, or the onboarding process of employees. We are seeing the increasing use of predictive people analytics. So not just running surveys, but proactively doing sentiment analysis with seamless interfaces in our mobile phones with the personas and big data machines behind it, where we analyze and predict behaviors and predict engagement levels and predict intentions for voluntary turnover. We are seeing these things today in Cyprus, not so much yet, but we do. The HR professional will evolve. The HR professional will become a different kind of animal. And we need to develop fast our digital skills, but also, as I said, our jobs will become much more interactive in terms of human interactions, and soft skills will again gain center stage. Technology, the new technologies are exactly that. They are new for everyone. So we need agility and the growth mindset, as we discussed earlier, to be able to learn fast and adapt. But this will happen to every one of us, to all of us, and we will all have the opportunity to do so as new technologies emerge, and especially as new technologies are loaded with intelligence, because this is where the turning point will be with regards to outsourcing the smaller decisions of our and the parts of our business to artificial intelligence, and not just to non-intelligent automations. As we move forward, the more artificial intelligence invades our life, the more important soft skills will become. This is my position. I strongly believe that. I have seen it in the mega trends from research, and I really see that the future HR professional will be a more human animal, but also digitally equipped.
Great, thank you. Let's see what that new animal will turn out to be. Maria, did you want to add something?
Yes, first of all, I agree completely with Panayiotis. Definitely, we see all of these enablers that are the outcome of digital transformation, which, as we saw in the past year, digital transformation has not only drove different parts of the business, as also mentioned in the accountant profession and in the banking sector, but also definitely in the HR departments and the HR professionals. And what I'd like to add on Panayiotis' points, which I definitely agree, are the really big trend now that is emerging about employee experience. So what we saw, as Panayiotis mentioned, personas, that now we are not only looking employees from the demographics perspective and analyzing their views from that perspective, but we're also adding new layers to that analysis by including their personalities, their interests, their feelings. And this is a really big thing that we're started to see in other companies in other countries, but it's also started to emerge in Cyprus. And this is really very, very, very exciting for HR professionals in Cyprus, because we see that due to COVID-19, the future of work and HR professionals can now come on top and showcase their strategic importance and how they can support business outcomes by emerging digital transformation, and also working hand in hand with other business functions to also increase customer experience, which is also very important in the future of work.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Very, very indeed, I agree with you as well. It would be really great if we had a panel tonight with 10 different professions, and we can ask each profession, what they thought, even if we had research to back it up. Maybe we can have a future webinar or even face-to-face session on that. I think now it's time to end tonight's session. I would like to thank you all for being with us tonight, as well as all presenters for their very insightful interventions. Special thanks to our colleagues Justina and Robert, the silent heroes behind all this, at the ICAEW, for the coordination and the assistance in tonight's event. Thank you, everybody, and good night.